Hello everyone. Welcome back to our VulnHub walkthrough series. In today's video, we'll continue exploring the exciting VulnHub collection with Symfonos. Specifically, we're diving into the third virtual machine in the series, Symfonos 3. This intermediate OSCP-like real-world scenario machine is designed to highlight the importance of understanding vulnerabilities and how to exploit them effectively. Let's get started. To begin, head over to the VulnHub website and download the machine's image file. If you're new to VulnHub, make sure to check out our playlist for helpful guides on how to use the platform. Now, let's get started with exploiting this machine. Setting up. We previously downloaded all 6 image files, so our next step is to set up the virtual image in VirtualBox. The downloaded image file is in 7Z format, so start by extracting the archive to access the files within. You'll find several files, including the essential VMDK files, in the extracted folder. Now, our next step involves creating a new virtual machine. In VirtualBox, click New to create a new VM. Name it Symfonos 3, set the OS type to Linux, and choose Other Linux 64-bit for the version since the specific distribution is unknown. Next, allocate the desired amount of RAM. Then, select Use an existing virtual hard disk file and locate the VMDK file. Now, click on Finish to complete the setup. Once the setup is complete, you'll see the Symfonos 3 vulnerable machine in the VirtualBox Manager. For better organization, you must regroup it. To ensure that both your Kali Linux machine, used for attacks, and the vulnerable machine are connected to the same network, we need to make sure they're both connected via a host-only adapter. So, go to Settings, and change the network adapter to host-only. Since everything is ready, let's attempt to start the VM to check if it works. Once it's ready, you should see a login prompt, indicating that everything is set up and we can begin our exploration. Let's dive into the fun. Enumeration. The first step in our attack is enumeration, where we identify the IP address of our target machine using the NetDiscover tool. This step helps map the network and locate devices that are up and accessible. To execute this, open a terminal and enter netdiscover-I. Then specify the network interface to use for scanning, which in this case is ETH1. The command output displays a list of devices detected on the network, showing their IP and MAC addresses, as well as the associated vendor. From these results, we can see several IP addresses along with their corresponding MAC addresses. Our target machine's IP address is identified as 192.168.103.15. Next, we'll perform a network scan to identify open ports on the target, which is a critical part of the enumeration process. Identifying open ports provides insights into the network's attack surface, helping us pinpoint services that may be vulnerable to exploitation. For this task, we'll use the popular network scanning tool, Nmap. To execute the scan, open a terminal and run the command nmap-S_C-S_V, followed by the target IP address. Here's what the command does. -S_C initiates a script scan using Nmap's default scripts. These scripts probe for additional details about each service and help identify potential vulnerabilities. -S_V enables version detection, allowing Nmap to determine the version of the services running on open ports. Once the scan is completed, the results reveal 3 open ports with their respective services. Port 21, TCP, running FTP, File Transfer Protocol, with the server identified as ProFTPD 1.3.5b. Port 22, TCP, running SSH, Secure Shell, which provides remote access if valid credentials are available. Although SSH is generally secure, weak or default passwords could make it exploitable. Port 80, TCP, running HTTP on a web server. The scan shows a basic website with no title, hosted on Apache HTTPD. This service is a common entry point for attacks and may contain web-based vulnerabilities. These open ports present potential entry points into the target system. The next step is to conduct a deeper enumeration of each service to uncover vulnerabilities or clues that could facilitate initial or shell access. This focused analysis will guide us in developing a strategic approach to compromise the target. Our next steps involve investigating potential vulnerabilities to identify opportunities for shell access or other footholds on the target system. Since the HTTP web server is running on port 80, we'll begin by examining it, as web services often serve as primary access points and may reveal additional attack vectors. To start, access the web service by entering the target's IP address directly into a web browser. The page loads with visual content depicting a scene from Greek mythology, likely centered around the figure of Cerberus. The central figure is a monstrous three-headed dog, commonly associated with guarding the underworld. Its three heads have menacing expressions and fiery eyes. A shadowy figure, likely Hades, the god of the underworld, stands beside Cerberus, holding what appears to be a spear or staff. To uncover hidden clues, inspect the page source. Within the source code, we discover a hint. Can you bust the underworld? This clue suggests the potential presence of a hidden file or directory, prompting further exploration. Let's now perform directory enumeration. To locate hidden resources, we'll use directory enumeration tools such as dirb or GoBuster. These tools systematically probe for common directory and file names, which could uncover additional files or directories that are not directly visible from the website. This process will help us identify possible attack vectors or sensitive information that can aid in further exploitation. Using darb, we start by scanning the base URL. The results reveal CGI bin, status code 403 forbidden, suggests a directory exists but requires further probing. Gate, status code 200 OK, indicating an accessible subdirectory worth investigating. Index.html, status code 200 OK, likely pointing to the main or home page. Server status, status code 403 forbidden, suggests restricted server monitoring data. The accessible gate directory stands out as a key point of interest. Navigating to this directory in the browser reveals content that closely resembles the main page. The imagery evokes a sense of an underworld setting, characterized by a dark and ominous atmosphere. A fiery glow illuminates the scene, enhancing the eerie vibe, while ruined structures in the background contribute to the impression of desolation and mystery. This thematic presentation aligns with the mythology-inspired elements seen on the main page, suggesting that this directory may contain additional clues or serve a specific purpose in the context of the target system. Upon inspecting the page source, no valuable information or clues are revealed. Therefore, we will perform another dirb scan, this time targeting the gate directory. The scan confirms the presence of index.html but reveals no additional information. To expand the search, we switch to a more comprehensive word list. But it looks like dirb is unable to enumerate the directory, so we will use GoBuster for this purpose. This extended scan uncovers Cerberus. Status code 301 moved permanently indicates a directory that redirects to http://12.1638.5 gate//Cerberus/. The discovery of the Cerberus directory is significant. It suggests another layer of content or functionality, potentially exposing vulnerabilities or providing further clues for exploitation. Next, we will explore the Cerberus directory to analyze its contents and continue our enumeration process. Upon loading the page, we see an image of a three-headed dog, likely Cerberus from Greek mythology, depicted in a fiery and menacing setting. This visual, however, does not provide any immediate hints. Reviewing the page source also reveals no additional clues, prompting us to extend our search. Using dirb to enumerate the Cerberus directory yields the following results. Index.html. This file may be the home page of Cerberus, which was previously investigated. Tartarus, a new directory discovered, indicating deeper directory nesting. Additionally, dirb automatically enumerates the Tartarus directory, revealing index.html, likely the home page of Tartarus. Research, a large file sized at 6,825 bytes, which may potentially contain sensitive information or clues. This structure indicates an organized directory system designed to conceal information. The research file is particularly noteworthy and warrants closer examination for actionable insights. It's time to retrieve and analyze the research file. Use tools like curl, wget, or direct browser access to download the file. Upon inspecting its content, we find extensive information about research on gods and demons. While this content may hold potential clues or sensitive data, its sheer volume makes manual analysis impractical. It might be useful for generating a custom word list for further enumeration, but we cannot proceed directly with it for now. Instead, the discovery of the Tartarus directory is a significant breakthrough. This new directory suggests an additional layer of content or functionality that could provide actionable insights or lead to further vulnerabilities. Let's focus our attention on exploring Tartarus to determine its potential. Navigating to this directory presents a dramatic and chaotic visual scene set in a dark, cavernous underworld. This imagery aligns with Tartarus from Greek mythology, an abyss used as a prison for the wicked and the Titans, symbolizing torment and eternal darkness. It's a place of eternal punishment, located far below Hades. Now, let's inspect the page source for Tartarus. Inspecting the page source for Tartarus reveals a new hint. The underworld can be cruel, but it can also be misleading. This suggests that our approach to the enumeration process might be flawed, or we may be overlooking something critical. It indicates that we may have been enumerating directories incorrectly and need to adjust our strategy. Previously, we discovered a //CGI bin/ directory, which could potentially reveal exploitable configurations. The /CGI bin directory is a standard location for Common Gateway Interface (CGI) scripts, commonly used to execute server-side code. Upon visiting it, we encountered a permission denied message, but directories like /CGI-bin or /server-status often contain valuable information, such as server configurations, running processes, or debugging data. These can be leveraged by attackers to exploit vulnerabilities. To further investigate, we'll perform directory busting again to locate any accessible resources. This time, the search reveals a new directory, /underworld, which returns a 200 OK response, indicating it is accessible. Upon accessing the underworld directory, we're presented with information about the system's uptime and load averages. This indicates that the script in this directory outputs server status, which could provide useful details for further reconnaissance. Given this, we need to analyze the potential risks. The underworld directory appears highly suspicious and warrants a closer inspection. CGI scripts in directories like these are often vulnerable to various exploits, including arbitrary code execution, path traversal attacks, shell shock vulnerability. Based on the information gathered, it seems likely that the shell shock vulnerability is a potential risk. This vulnerability allows attackers to execute arbitrary code on the server, making it a critical point for further exploitation. To investigate further, we'll proceed by testing the target for vulnerabilities, specifically related to OS command injection. This may include testing for shell shock, which could potentially provide a foothold on the target system. Foothold. To test the target for shell shock and command injection vulnerabilities, we'll utilize the comics tool. This tool automates the detection and exploitation of command injection flaws, making it a valuable resource for identifying potential vulnerabilities that could grant initial access to the system. To run comics against the target URL, run comics-u and paste the target URL that we want to inspect. The comics tool will analyze the target and determine whether the script is potentially vulnerable. During the scan, comics will prompt us to enable the shell shock module. When asked, type yes to enable it and initiate heuristic tests for the shell shock vulnerability. The comics tests for command injection through the user agent HTTP header. In this case, we discover that the user agent header is injectable, confirming that the shell shock vulnerability can be exploited using this header. Once the shell shock vulnerability is successfully exploited, the tool will confirm the script's susceptibility. It will then prompt for a sudo terminal shell. Type WA to continue, which will allow comics to initiate an OS shell on the target system. At this point, a pseudo terminal shell is opened, granting us direct interaction with the target system. We now have a command shell through which we can execute additional commands and explore the system for vulnerabilities or sensitive information. To check the available commands in the shell, use a question mark, which will list the options available. With this pseudo terminal, we will now establish a reverse shell to connect from the target system back to the attacker's machine using netcat. Before executing the reverse shell, we need to set up a listener on our attacking machine. This is done using netcat, which will listen for the incoming connection from the target system. Once the listener is ready, we can execute the crafted reverse shell command. Upon successful execution, a reverse shell will be established, connecting the target system to our attacking machine and providing us with interactive access. For better usability and control over the shell, we need to upgrade it. First, we will check if Python is available by running the command, which Python. Since Python is present, we will use it to spawn a more stable shell by running the command python-c import pty, pty.sponge bins bash. This command will give us a fully interactive shell. Additionally, we set the terminal type with export term equal xterm. This helps ensure smoother interaction with the remote shell, improving the post-exploitation workflow and allowing us to interact with the target system more effectively. Since we now have user access, let's check if there are any flags present. We start by using the cd command to navigate to the Cerberus home directory. However, it appears that the default directory is not set, so we will change the directory manually. First, we navigate to the home directory and list the files and directories. Here, we find two directories, Cerberus and Hades. These appear to be the home directories of the users on the system. Next, we change the directory to Cerberus and inspect the files and directories. Inside, we find the usual default user configuration files, such as tot.bashrc and .profile, as well as a tot.bash history file, which is linked to /dev_nulf, indicating that history logging is disabled. However, we do not find any flags here. This suggests that there may be a flag in the Hades user's home directory. To access this, we need to escalate privileges to the Hades user. We will need to enumerate the system further to find a way to escalate our privileges and gain access to the Hades user account. Privilege escalation. Escalate user to Hades. In the privilege escalation process, the primary objective is to gather system information and identify any vulnerabilities or misconfigurations that could grant elevated privileges, potentially leading to root access. However, since we currently have limited user access through the reverse shell, we cannot access certain files or commands necessary for a comprehensive assessment. Earlier, we noticed that we don't have the necessary permissions to perform a full user privilege enumeration. To move forward, we run the sudo l command to check if the Cerberus user has any sudo privileges. The command returns a sudo command not found error, indicating that the Cerberus user does not have sudo access. To gather more details, we run the id command, which provides the user's UID, GID, and group memberships. In this case, the Cerberus user is a member of the www data and PCAP groups. The www data group is commonly used by web services, while PCAP indicates permission to access packet capture tools like TCP dump, which could be useful for further privilege escalation. To verify if TCP dump is available, we use the command, which TCP dump. Upon execution, it confirms that the TCP dump binary is located in /usr/local/bin. This means we can use TCP dump to capture network traffic on available interfaces. Next, we check the available network interfaces by running TCP dump -D. Of the available interfaces, the most valuable are ENP0S3, which may be used as the primary network interface, ANY, which is used to capture traffic from all interfaces, LOW, which is used by the loopback interface. We proceed by using TCP dump to capture network traffic from all interfaces. The -I option specifies the interface name, and the -wo option is used to specify the file where the captured data will be stored. We append the ampersand symbol to run the command in the background. The command starts capturing traffic and writing it to the capture.pcap file. Once the traffic is captured in capture.pcap, we need to transfer the file to our machine for analysis. This can be done using tools like Wireshark for detailed graphical traffic analysis, or T-Shark, a command line tool for quicker queries. To serve the capture.pcap file, we use Python's built-in HTTP server. First, we check the Python version on the target machine. Since the target is running Python 2, we use the command python-m simple HTTP server. This command will initiate the Python simple HTTP server. Now we can use wget to download the file to our local machine. The file is successfully downloaded with the help of wget. Next, we analyze the PCAP file for credentials in plaintext, such as HTTP, FTP, or other unencrypted protocols. Connections to unusual hosts, which may indicate malicious activity or exfiltration attempts. Traffic anomalies, such as the use of suspicious protocols or unusually high-volume data transfers. It's important to note, if no clues or hidden details are found during the initial analysis, consider downloading the PCAP file again. This is because the capture process is continuously running, potentially collecting new and relevant data over time. For this analysis, we won't use Wireshark or T-Shark. Instead, we'll upload the file to A-Packets, an online tool, which will automatically filter and highlight key findings. To upload the captured PCAP file, click on Upload PCAP File, which will redirect to an area where you can either drag and drop the PCAP file or upload it from your local device. Upon upload, we need to accept the terms of service to continue. After a successful upload, the tool will generate a detailed report. Click on View Report. In the Found Credentials section, it shows 1 in red, which indicates that a credential is present. Yes, this appears to be a credential used to connect back to the FTP server. Now that we have a credential, it will help us access the user Hades and escalate further. We can initiate the su command to switch to the substitute user. However, when I stopped the previously used Python HTTP server, it disconnected the connection. This username works for FTP as expected, but if we try it on SSH to establish a connection, SSH proves to be more stable. Upon trying with the credential, I successfully connect via SSH. Now that we are logged in as Hades, we check for any flags in this user's directory. However, there is no flag in this directory. It seems the flag is only accessible at the root level, but we currently lack the necessary permissions to access the root directory. Escalate to root. Our objective is to escalate privileges to root by identifying system vulnerabilities or misconfigurations that may allow us to gain root shell access. However, I believe we still do not have sufficient user privileges, which restricts our ability to access certain files and commands for a full assessment. Escalate to root. Our objective is to escalate privileges to root by identifying system vulnerabilities or misconfigurations that may allow us to gain root shell access. However, the connection is unstable and may interrupt during the escalation process. To ensure a more stable connection, we decide to connect to a different service. Since ports TOS/21 and 22 are open, we choose to use the SSH service. We successfully connect via SSH, but we still have limited user privileges, which restrict our ability to access certain files and commands for a full assessment. To explore potential avenues for escalating to root, we first check for sudo privileges. Running the command, sudo-l fails because sudo is not available for the current user. This indicates that we cannot escalate privileges using the sudo command line utility. Next, we need to enumerate the user's access. We use the ID command to display the user and group identity of the Hades user. This command reveals useful information about the user's UID, GID, and the secondary groups they belong to. From the output of the ID command, we gather the following information. UID equals 1000 Hades. The primary user ID for the Hades user is 1000. This UID determines the user's identity when executing processes or accessing resources. GID equals 1000. The primary group ID for the Hades user is also 1000, indicating ownership of resources tied to the Hades group. Groups equals 1000 Hades, 1002 gods, The Hades user is a member of the gods group, ID 1002. This provides additional permissions, access to files or processes owned by the gods group, potential influence from cron jobs or processes initiated by members of the gods group. This confirms the user's primary and supplementary group memberships. To investigate the gods group's influence on running processes, particularly cron jobs, we use the pspy64 tool. pspy64 is a lightweight tool designed to monitor processes executed on a system without requiring root permissions. It helps identify scheduled tasks, group-level activities, and commands executed by various users or groups. Steps to deploy and run pspy64. 1. First, download pspy64 from GitHub onto the attacker's machine. 2. Now we need to transfer the tool to the target. 3. Set up an HTTP server using Python. 4. On the target machine, use wget to download the tool. Ensure the pspy64 binary has executable permissions by listing files and directories. It looks like this tool does not have execution permission, so modify it using chmod plus xpspy64. Execute the tool on the target to monitor system processes in real time. The output reveals critical details about processes running under UID 1001 associated with the gods group. These processes inherit the permissions granted to the gods group, allowing specific actions or access. Upon further analysis of the logs, a key finding stands out, an interesting factor that may allow escalation to a root shell. The logs highlight a process running with root privileges, UID 0. This includes cron jobs and other root-level activities that present potential privilege escalation opportunities. Let's examine these findings. The log shows a series of processes running with root privileges, UID 0, including cron jobs, which execute commands on a schedule. Among these, a cron job runs /us/bin/curl space -- silent space -- I space 127.0.0.1 space greater than space /opt/ftp client /statuscheck.txt, indicating it writes to a specific file. If this file or its parent directory is writable by a non-root user, it becomes a potential target for tampering, such as replacing the file with a symlink to a critical system file, like /etc/crontab, enabling the insertion of malicious commands. Another key process is the execution of /opsh/ftp client /ftpclient.py, a Python script that runs as root. If this script is writable, an attacker can modify it to include arbitrary code or commands, like spawning a reverse shell or executing /bin/bash. The pro-FTPD service is also running and may present vulnerabilities if it is misconfigured or outdated, allowing attackers to exploit it for privilege escalation. These factors, including the root-level cron jobs, writable resources, and potentially vulnerable services, create an opportunity for privilege escalation and unauthorized access to root. Next, we should review the /op/ftp client /ftpclient.py script to understand its functionality and evaluate how it might be exploited. Upon analysis, the script reveals that the ftpclient.py program automates the upload of a file to an FTP server running on 127.0.0.1 localhost. It establishes an FTP connection using the credentials, and the script navigates to the /srv/ftp directory on the FTP server. The upload function handles the upload of the /opt/client/statuscheck.txt file to the server's current working directory using the ftp.storebinary method. After successfully uploading the file, the connection is terminated with ftp.quit. Upon correlating this script with the cron job, we observe that the cron job periodically executes ftpclient.py with root privileges to upload the statuscheck.txt file. This setup provides two potential avenues for exploitation. The first method is by manipulating the input file. Here, the statuscheck.txt file, used as input, might be writable by non-root users. If this is the case, injecting malicious content or commands into this file could result in those commands being executed with root privileges during the upload process. The other method is by tampering with the script. If the ftpcclient.py script itself is writable, it could be modified to include malicious commands or create a reverse shell, which would also execute with root privileges during the scheduled cron job. To proceed, the next logical step is to thoroughly investigate the file and directory permissions for /opt/ftpclient/ftpclient.py, /opt/client/statuscheck.txt, and their parent directories. This investigation will help determine potential points of tampering that could be exploited to gain root access. Rather than modifying the current Python program directly, which might cause issues, we will use a different approach. The script relies on Python's ftplib library. If we can modify this library with injected malicious code, it would execute the next time the cron job triggers the script. Let's start by locating the ftplib library. Using the command find /space-iname **ftplib *2> we identify the locations of the ftplib.py library files for Python 2.7 and Python 3.5. Next, we check the permissions on /usr/lib/python 2.7/ftplib.py. The output reveals that the file is writable by the current user, which indicates an improper configuration, as critical system libraries should not be user writable. Since the library is writable, we can append malicious code to it. We choose to append a reverse shell command to the library. But before doing that, we need to set up a netcat listener on the attacker's machine to receive the reverse shell connection. Now that the listener is set up, we are ready to inject a reverse shell into the ftplib.py file. This can be done by navigating to the file and finding a suitable location for the injection. Alternatively, we can use the echo utility command to inject the reverse shell code into this file. This command uses the OS module to execute a reverse shell, connecting back to the attacker's machine on IP address and port 1234. Next, when the cron job runs and executes the ftpclient.py script, it imports ftplib, which now contains the malicious code. This causes the reverse shell to execute with root privileges, establishing a connection back to the attacker. Finally, we now have a root shell. Running the whoami command confirms that we have root access. To spawn a fully interactive shell, we run the command python-c import pty pty.spawn open parentheses /bin/bash close parentheses . This provides us with a fully interactive root shell, giving us full control of the system. We can now change the directory to /root and check for the root flag. Using the cat command, we reveal the root flag. If you have any doubts or queries related to this video, feel free to write to me in the comments section.